Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Fairfax. We hope you enjoy this sermon from a recent Sunday worship service.
Inscribed on the walls of the Temple of Apollo at Delphi in Greece are the words, "Know thyself." These words, along with many other popular proverbs from the time, are inscribed on the walls. But "Know thyself" has been the most referenced and inspirational to philosophers, theologians, and psychoanalysts over time. It is a simple, commanding phrase, and its simplicity is part of its allure. Early Greek interpretation associated the phrase with knowing your limits or knowing your mortality. In the famous play Prometheus Bound, in which the Titan Prometheus is chained to a boulder for defying the gods, Oceanus, a fellow Titan, visits Prometheus in his imprisonment, telling him, "Know yourself and adopt new habits, for there is even a new leader among the gods." A new leader. In this case, it's Zeus. And what was Prometheus's crime? Gifting humanity with the knowledge of fire and the arts. Two incredible gifts which give people power. Power to keep ourselves warm and safe, power to defend ourselves, and power to imagine, create, and dream beautifully and provocatively together. A people with power is a threat to a god, or someone wanting to be a god. And Oceanus telling Prometheus to know himself was him telling him to know his place. Prometheus rejected this, a feeling which I'm sure many of us can resonate with. The ancient Greeks also considered the phrase "know thyself" as an expression of the virtues of wisdom, temperance, courage, and justice. The Greeks, though, they were not the only ones to spend deep thought and time with this thought. Eastern meditation practices have centered on the concept of self-realization and self-knowledge as the ultimate, as even a way to enlightenment. Deepak Chopra, a practitioner of transcendental meditation, writes, "The path to freedom is self-realization. Knowing your essential nature means you become free from the binding influence of identification with the objects of perception. You now know who you are not by your perceptions, not by your body or your thoughts or your feelings. You are unlimited, non-local, pure awareness." Knowing ourselves is something that we can go through our whole lives without actually doing. In the first formative years of our lives, we gather a sense of self based on the grown-ups in our lives and their validation of our experience and existence. Unfortunately, for many of us, our grown-ups were imperfect and often harmful to the development of our senses of self. Some of us have found chosen family in people who do validate our experience. Having agency as adults gives us the freedom to make more choices about who we include in our lives. This is also a very tough reality for those of us who are parents, knowing that how we respond to the motions of our young children will influence their senses of self. Luckily, our sense of identity is never stagnant. It is always in formation, even as we grow late into our years. And repair work is key to dealing with these imperfections we take with us into everyday interactions. I cannot tell you how many times I have apologized to my children because my messiness didn't affirm their worth in a particular moment. Reparations matter. And reparations are hard to make when we do not regularly reflect on ourselves and our actions, and when we do not have the humility to admit our wrongs. Erik Erikson, a 20th century psychoanalyst specializing in children, developed the framework of the 8 stages of human development. He claims that we each have an ego identity, which is the conscious sense of self that we develop through social interaction, which is constantly changing due to new experiences and information we acquire in our daily interaction with others, our friends, our coworkers, neighbors, strangers. Knowing ourselves is not a simple act of navel-gazing, an inward focus in a vacuum. We cannot do this important and easy-to-avoid work in isolation. We need each other for reflection, for grounding, for validation, for conflict from which we can learn. Small group ministry, like the soul circles we have here, are a fabulous way to practice this. We need to trust ourselves, and we cannot do that if we do not have a good sense of who we are, where we come from, to whom we belong, which is each other, and why we behave or react to the things that we do. The UUA has no small requirement for those of us seeking to be ministers. On top, mom of a minister knows. On top of an 81 credits master's program in divinity, a 1-year full-time or 2-year half-time internship, and a career assessment, the UUA also requires at least 1 unit of CPE, which is clinical pastoral education. And CPE is life-changing, incredibly difficult training that makes us face ourselves honestly. John knows. Face ourselves honestly in conversation with others who are also training to be spiritual caregivers. People who often face fallout or burnout and need to learn how to protect ourselves from the problems people bring to us and to recognize when something bats up against something from our lives and our identities. It is exceptionally important that caregivers know how to do this. But can you imagine a world, what a world would look like if we were all more aware of ourselves and these things that we bat up against regularly, capable of facing the bitter truths behind the way we behave and react when we come up against certain things? That is power. One of my greatest takeaways from CPE is that there are myths we have each been raised with that influence the way we react and behave. In a book by Edward Wimberly titled Recalling Our Own Stories, Spiritual Renewal for Religious Caregivers, he explores personal myths rooted in object relations theory, or how we as individuals internalize the positives and negatives we saw in significant others, self-psychology, or how we as individuals respond empathically to our externalized relationships with significant others, and family systems theory, or how the interactions of marital and family members influence the growth of others. And these myths are based on stories that surround our births. It's based on the order in which we were birthed, our gender, our sex, our names and our nicknames, our peer and sibling relationships, the roles we filled, the discipline we received, our parents' relationships, and much more. Wimberly goes on to illustrate a few dominant myths he has witnessed in those whom he teaches and pastors to. As I go through these, think about which of these might apply to your life. The myth of rejection, the belief that you are unwanted, even unwelcome in life. The myth of powerlessness, the belief that other people have more power and control over our lives than we do. The myth of the loner, the belief that the world is untrustworthy and a person fears getting emotionally close, being hurt or disappointed. The myth of the good girl, The belief that you as a female must be subservient, acquiescent, obedient, and overly responsible for the emotional care and relationships in your life. The myth of invulnerability, the belief that vulnerability is a weakness and to be avoided at all costs for the sake of success, production, and achievement. The myth of sole responsibility, the belief that what happens in life solely depends on us. The myth of self-sacrifice or unlovability, the belief that we will only be loved if we hide our true selves. The myth of the savior, the belief that our role in life is to bring peace and stability. This is one ministers are often prone to. And Gen Alpha, they would probably call it main character syndrome. And then there is the myth of aloofness, the belief that we are inept at close relationships. These are just a few. And there are so many nuanced myths that we each carry with us, unique to our own experiences. They are complicated, delicate, and so hard to face. It makes me think of the never-ending story. Are you all familiar with the never-ending story? Some of us. Atreyu, who is a brave young warrior who sets out as the only hope to save his world from the threat of the nothing. He faces a number of trials, one of which is facing himself. He meets this old gnome guy along the way and on his adventures, and he says, confronted with their true selves, most men run away screaming. I'd add women do too. It is psychologically hard work. Being aware of our own myths is crucial towards understanding ourselves and why we do what we do and feel the way we feel. And when we face these myths, the best thing that we're able to do is to reauthor them, to write new stories that we claim for ourselves. Just like the song said at the beginning, the rest is unwritten. It is up to us. This is profoundly difficult work that gives us power to know what we will accept as ours and what we can let others keep for themselves. Can you imagine a world in which we know our worth and uniqueness in relationship with knowing everyone else's worth and uniqueness? We belong to each other. We are individuals, whole and holy, with our own unique experiences and upbringings, with the myths that shape us, and the many different ways we think and feel and appreciate and care. This is true. And we belong to each other. We are here together on this one planet, in this interdependent web of all existence. And in this worldwide family system, with anxiety sky high, siblings thousands of miles away, still killing each other in wars, starving each other, hating each other, and the dependent role that America has played in the world stage in the past, giving us maybe the myth of the savior, is changing. And we are experiencing a crisis of our own. This worldwide system is out of balance. And family systems theory tells us that when that happens, things need to change. They need to adjust to make things right again. Look, I know that maybe this wasn't the message you were hoping for this morning. There is a lot of work to be done, a lot of grief to be held, and a lot of anxiety to address. And the idea of doing the really difficult work of facing ourselves when the whole world feels like it's on the brink of collapse seems like a tough ask. And it is, but it is a worthy one. and one we can do alongside all of the other good work we will do in order to make this world a more loving place. But I place this work high on the priority list. It will keep us away from the frequently futile and often harmful response of blaming others, finding problems rather than focusing on solutions and mutuality. Allowing people to keep what is theirs as we keep what is ours, as we move forward together in hope of making a more loving world. Knowing ourselves will transform us. And transformed people transform the world, little by little, in small, impactful, thoughtful acts of love and justice. That is, I think, the best way to bring about that hopeful future we envision. The one where hatred ceases, where no one has their back up against a wall, where all people can flourish on a healthy and thriving planet. And transformation is power to the people. And like Prometheus taught us, people with power is a threat to a god, or someone wanting to be a god. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this sermon from the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Fairfax. To listen to more sermon podcasts, go to uucf.org/worship-services and scroll down to sermon podcasts.